As you may be aware, my kidneys packed up on me about a year ago and I've been on dialysis ever since. Now, it occurred to me in that time that the majority of us tend to learn everything we know about medicine when it happens to us or someone close to us, and that we tend to learn it in a bit of a hurry as we're being bombarded by all these new concepts and phrases and words, and it can get a bit overwhelming to the point where you find yourself wishing for an NHS pamphlet. It's kind of like, come on, you do pamphlets on absolutely everything else. You've got to do a pamphlet on this. Please tell me there's a pamphlet. But it's the 21st century. We've all got one of these in our pockets. It should be a video pamphlet. And that's what this is. So, for the simply curious, or those who find themselves in a similar situation and need a bit of a heads up, this is my video pamphlet for dialysis. And I must stress that I don't imagine myself to be any kind of expert. These are just based on my experiences. Okay? So your kidneys have gone a bit Amstrad on you. First off, don't panic. I know it can seem scary, believe me, I know, but it's okay. Of all the vital organs that could pack up on you, kidney is about the best you could hope for a couple of reasons. Firstly, there's no dialysis for failing hearts and livers and lungs that allow you to continue to lead a relatively normal life. And secondly, the kidney is the most transplanted and donated organ in the world, and the one with the highest success rate. Dialysis can keep you going in the meantime. What is dialysis? Dialysis is a process that essentially replicates a couple of crucial functions that your knackered kidneys may no longer be able to do for you. Firstly, it cleans the blood of all the crap that builds up and can eventually become toxic and kill you, which is obviously something you don't want. Secondly, it filters off the urea that you would otherwise ultimately pass as urine. Patients with buggered kidneys often don't pee as much, and fluid builds up in the feet and legs, the lowest point on the body, and it can be quite painful. I am very fortunate in that seems to be the one function of my kidneys that's still working, so I'm quite grateful. How does it work? I'm not going to get into great detail or pretend that I know exactly how it works. If you want to know, Google it. But in simplest terms, dialysis is a process that involves plugging you into an expensive washing machine that takes your blood, cleans it of the urea and the crap by means of a thing called an artificial kidney, which is basically just a really expensive Brita filter cartridge, and then puts it back. That's it. The machines are very sensitive, and will stop and sound alarms if anything's wrong. So if the pressure's too high or too low, if there's air or a clot detected, anything like that. It can be annoying when you can set the machine off with a particularly hearty cough, but believe me, you want them that sensitive. You want, if anything is going wrong, you want that machine making as much noise as possible for you. How do they plug you in? There are two main ways that you can be plugged in, and which one you go with will largely depend on how quickly your kidney function is declining. First off, you've got lines. Now, these are also known as a tunneled line, a Hickman line. Proper name is a central venous catheter. It basically consists of two plastic tubes known as lumens sticking out of your chest, and the tubes on the inside go into a vein and an artery. In essence, all they have to do to connect you is undo the caps, alcohol wiped to within an inch of its life, flush with saline, check the flow, and then plug a couple of tubes in, and you're good to go. At the end, they simply reverse the process. The only difference is this time that they give you a thing called Citralock, which is kind of like a chemical bung. It's basically there to keep everything inside the line where it's supposed to be. The fun thing about it is that when they inject it, it makes your lips tingle, like you've just had a sip of like sort of Listerine or something. Pros and cons. Lines can be put in and be usable in about an hour, so they are ideal for patients whose kidney function is declining quickly. Once they're in, they are easy and painless to connect to the machine. The big drawback with a line, though, is that it's a massive infection risk. you've basically got an open wound with a piece of plastic sticking out of it. It needs to be kept clean. So they will change the dressing on it once a week, which if you're like me is tantamount to a free waxing, and you can't get them wet. So you can't go swimming, you can't submerge yourself in the bath, and when you shower you're going to need to shower in a careful L shape around yourself. It is also for that reason that they don't like you to keep the line in for more than about 6 months. But you know, the longer that you have it, the more likely you are to get a nasty infection somewhere you really don't want it. And finally, and I'm not going to lie to you, it hurt like an absolute sod to be put in. Even with local anaesthetic, it feels like someone trying to ram a knitting needle into you and beat you up. The only plus thing that I can offer is that it's a fairly short procedure. It doesn't last very long, and afterwards, about 10 minutes later, I just had a kind of numb, sort of, dull ache, the soreness that you would usually get. The other method for plugging you in is what's called a fistula, or more properly an arteriovenous fistula. This involves stitching together a vein and an artery in your arm to create a kind of high-speed access line for dialysis, which they then access by putting 2 needles into your arm a short distance apart, kind of like you're having 2 simultaneous blood tests. And those needles connect to tubes which connect to the machine. Pros and cons. A fistula represents an extremely low infection risk, basically because it's not a plastic tube sticking out of a hole in your chest. They offer a faster flow than lines, and a faster flow means a better dialysis. You can shower normally and go swimming with a fistula, not a problem. What is a problem, and is rather a big problem, is that you need surgery under local anaesthetic to create a fistula, and a good 6 weeks or more for it to mature and become usable. And even then, you might have to have more procedures done. You might need to have, for example, a fistuloplasty which widens the vein if there's a stenosis, which is basically where it's too narrow and the flow rate is too low. All told, my fistula took from the time it was put in to the time that it was usable 8 months and 2 fistuloplasties. So it can take a while. Also, fistulas can fail. Only around about 67% are patent after a year. So the longer you have it, the more likely it is to go kaput on you. And when that happens, before they even think about booking you in to create a new fistula, they're going to book you in to put a line in you so that you can carry on dialysis. And of course, it involves them sticking 2 needles in your arm 3 times a week. You can get a cream called Emla on prescription, which is basically an anaesthetic cream. You put it on an hour beforehand, wrap it in cling film so you don't smudge it on your clothes and so that it absorbs, and by the time they stick the needles in you, it's sufficiently deadened most of your skin so that you don't feel it. You'll feel it on the inside a little bit, but otherwise it's much more pleasant. The whole process can be uncomfortable and even painful early on, as your fistula is new and it's not quite, it's not been strengthened through use, and you haven't built up the scar tissue from all the needles and things like that. So it can be uncomfortable early on, particularly as you've got to keep your arm still then for about 4 hours. It's not ideal. What is it actually like? 3 times a week you'll go to a particular hospital ward or a separate dialysis centre where you'll be plugged in and dialysed for a session of usually 4 hours. You'll sit or lie in a chair which generally has buttons for raising, lowering, tilting, etc. They're not the most comfortable chairs in the world, I have to say. If you're not careful, you can give yourself a bit of a stiff neck or stiff back from the way you sit. Depending on whether you have a line or a fistula, it could take between, as little as 5 minutes, maybe 20 minutes to get you plugged in. It's usually around 10 to 15 minutes. They will take your temperature and your blood pressure at the beginning and end of the session, and they will also weigh you. Don't worry, clothes and shoes on. Now the reason they weigh you is you'll have what's called a dry weight. Now this is what the consultant believes you to weigh when empty of all waste fluid, and initially it's a bit of a rough guess. They use your weight at the beginning of the session against your dry weight to determine how much fluid to take off you during the session, and that's something that you need to work out with them a bit. If they take too much, you could get dehydrated and go all faint and wobbly. If they don't take enough, you could get fluid retention and get painful feet. If necessary, your dry weight will be revised. I mean, the aim really is to make sure that they take the right amount of fluid off you each time. And that's basically the amount of fluid that your kidneys can't cope with by themselves. Other measures regarding your dry weight and how much fluid is taken off could include imposing fluid restrictions, where you're not allowed to drink more than a certain amount per day. This varies from patient to patient and depends pretty much on how much they pee each day. All told, the plugging in, unplugging, measuring, weighing, etc. can add about 30 minutes either side of the session, so assume you're going to be there for about 5 hours. At the start of the session, you'll probably be given an anticoagulant called tinzaparin, which is to stop your blood from clotting in the machine. When you're given injections on dialysis, they do them directly into the machine, so they don't have to create any new holes in you. At the end of the month, you will generally have bloods taken at the beginning and end of the session, and those results will go to your consultant so that they can see if they need to change anything, increase your medication, decrease, whatever. You might also be given an injection of Venofer, which is iron, because kidney patients can be a bit anemic, and EPO, yes, the drug that Lance Armstrong used to cheat with. That encourages the production of red blood cells, which is something that your kidneys can't really do very well for themselves anymore. You might also be prescribed something called alpha-calcidol and Renovit, which are respectively a calcium supplement and a multivitamin specifically tailored to restore what is often stripped out of you by the dialysis process. You will also likely talk to a dietitian occasionally who will come and discuss your diet, what you're eating and drinking, and whether anything needs to change based on what the bloods indicate. Sodium's too high, potassium too low, blah blah blah, eat more of this, eat less of that. This is particularly important if you're diabetic. By the end of a session, you might feel a bit wiped out, a bit knackered. Some of this is dialysis because it can be a bit of a workout for your body, but a lot of it is because you're stuck in a chair for 4 hours and just slowly atrophying and stiffening up, and it can be exhausting doing nothing. What should I take with me? Some form of entertainment. A book, a mobile, tablet, laptop. NHS provides free Wi-Fi for patients, and you'll generally find at least one spare plug socket kicking about, so you can at least watch a bit of Netflix, YouTube, piss about on social media. Some dedicated dialysis units have a television set for every patient with the basic Freeview channels. Regardless, always bring headphones. A pillow, a cushion, possibly a neck pillow, even all three. The chairs can get a bit uncomfortable at times and you don't want to come off with a raging backache or neck ache. See how it is for your first session and then decide from there what you might want to take with you. Most places have a limited supply of those sort of, foam padded hospital cushion things. Snacks and drinks, in case you feel peckish. Being the NHS, you'll almost certainly get a cup of tea and some biscuits, possibly even a sandwich, but you might want to bring your own nibbles. If you're on fluid restrictions, obviously, you've got to take that into consideration. If you're someone who feels the heat or cold quite readily, then you might want to take a blanket or a battery-powered hand fan with you. Judge for yourself based on the average temperature that you feel when you're in the unit or ward, and whether they've got air conditioning, etc. And base it on that. What about days off? Now, generally you can choose between whether to have your dialysis sessions on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and what time of the day that you might want them based on availability. But what happens if you need to go to a wedding? and you've got to travel and you've got to go to someone's wedding and then come back. How does that work? Well, dialysis units and the hospital wards can arrange your sessions around. It's possible generally to move a session if necessary, to clear some space either side of a certain day so that you've got the ability to do your dialysis and then get straight on the motorway up to your auntie's wedding and then back down again before you need, dialysis a couple of days later. What about holidays? Little bit trickier. You can arrange through your dialysis centre or the hospital ward who's providing your dialysis appointments at other NHS dialysis wards and units around the country. As long as you do it sufficiently in advance, you could book yourself a holiday somewhere for a week and arrange to go have dialysis on your usual days during that week at a nearby centre. That's doable. There are also companies that provide dialysis cruises. These will actually be cruise ships with dialysis centres on board. It's doable. It takes a bit more arranging, but it is doable. Can you have dialysis at home? Yes, you can. You will need to discuss it with the renal consultant, but it is definitely an option. It's not one I've gone for, so I can't tell you much about it, but you are going to need a spare room to set aside for most of the equipment and the fluid and stuff that you'll need. But yes, it absolutely is an option and you can discuss it. Anything else I need to know? Yeah, be kind to your nurses. They're doing their job, and the result of that job is that you get to live a little bit longer. So be good to them. Massive shout out and eternal thanks to everyone at nephrology and rheumatology in Derriford, everyone on Mayflower Ward and everyone at the dialysis unit. I literally would not be here without you.